So a while back, I tied this, the runestone knot, something I learned from the godfather of paracord knots, J.D. Lenzen. While it is cool, some of you asked, where's the actual rune? What is a rune? How do you even say rune? Those are the questions we'll have answered by the end of this video. We're going to start off by making a larger version of the runestone knot. So let's weave. And just a quick note, as we get started, all paracord beads and hardware are from paracordweavers.com. We're going to start the large runestone knot like the last one. So pay attention to my hands and do exactly as I do using this over-under technique. Now a quick note about this wrapping part, don't wrap it too tightly, as number one, it'll be hard to remove your fingers later, and number two, it's going to cut off the circulation from your fingers. So kids, don't mess around with this and have some safety scissors nearby. This is just like the original one, but this time we have 6 passes in the middle instead of 3. So, runestones. Now imagine walking through... Let me use my cinematic voice. Imagine walking through a dense foggy forest and stumbling upon a massive stone covered in strange angular symbols. They look ancient, almost mystical, like they hold a secret from another time. These are Viking runes. But here's the question. Were they just a way to write, or did they have a deeper hidden purpose? Okay, I'll stop. Quick note about this next part, it will require a lacing needle or some hemostats to get the cord through, and the running ends are going to pass through the weaves we made in this figure 8 pattern. As I was saying, just a quick disclaimer, much of what I'll talk about is based on cursory research, and I am not any sort of historian, but I think it's just some interesting information. Runes are the letters in a set of related alphabets native to the Germanic peoples of the first millennium and beyond. And one such ethnic group that was part of these people were the Vikings, who use this alphabet as well. And I'm mentioning the Vikings because, look at them. They're pretty cool, and I'm sure they were absolute badasses back in their time. But anyhow, Viking runes weren't just a language. They were an alphabet system known as the, and I apologize if I butcher these words, Futhark. But unlike our modern alphabet, they weren't just used for writing letters. The Vikings carved runes into stone, wood, bone, and metal, and each rune had a name, a sound, and a symbolic meaning. For example, Thurizaz could mean a thorn, but also power and danger. Another quick note is that when your fingers start turning purple, it means it's time to finish the weave and remove your fingers from it before they lose complete circulation. As I was saying, Yira symbolized harvest and cycles of time, and Tivaz represented the god Tyr, justice and war. And if I sound like I'm trying to talk like a Viking, I'm only trying to do this to present this as authentically as possible. If you are of Viking or Germanic descent, I do not mean to offend you. When it comes to tightening everything up, you're going to need to work from the sides of the knot and just look closely and pay attention to the direction of the slack, and you want to work them out to either one of the running ends, ideally keeping both ends even. Now I have mentioned Vikings with regards to runes, but I don't mean to associate runes with Vikings exclusively, of course. When we're talking about runes, we're really talking about Scandinavian runes, because runes weren't just used by Vikings. They were part of the culture of all Norse and Germanic peoples long before the Viking Age and even long after it ended. Runes go as far back as the 2nd century AD, and for hundreds of years they were used by the early Germanic tribes of Northern Europe. Some of the earliest runestones found predate the Viking Age by centuries. And even after the Viking Age ended in the 11th century, runes were still being carved in Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. The use of runes continued into the Middle Ages, blending with Christian influences. Some medieval churches in Scandinavia even have runic inscriptions carved into their walls. And what's really interesting too is that runes weren't just for warriors and kings. Apparently farmers, merchants, and everyday people use them too. Some runestones tell simple stories of family life, land ownership, and maybe even jokes. So while we often connect runes with Vikings, they were actually a huge part of Scandinavian culture as a whole. Just something I thought I'd also mention. And as for our rune, I'm using some gold 95 paracord, and I'm going to go with the Tivaz rune. So just using the spaces in between the weaves, we can finally put an actual rune on our runestone. Now depending on the rune though, you may or may not be able to stitch it into the runestone knot, so you'll have to choose and plan accordingly. So during the editing process of this video, I realized that this Tiwa's rune was appropriated by some very bad people in history during the 1940s. And I just wanted to point out that obviously I did not choose this rune for that reason. I just chose this one because that's the one I chose. So let's not let some bad people ruin the history of different cultures for us. You know, it's really unfortunate, as if this was something from my culture, I'd really hate having it stolen and misappropriated into representing something that it is not. But that being said, I think if we only talk about the misappropriated versions, we're continually giving power and credence to them. There are limits to this, of course, but that's all I'll say about that. But as I was saying, some runes even had magical or spiritual associations, which leads us to the next interesting part. So apparently Vikings didn't write books per se, and instead they carved messages into things that lasted. And of course they relied on storytelling to pass down knowledge. And many runestones tell stories about warriors, family legacies, or even warnings to enemies. But some runic inscriptions don't appear to be just writing. Instead, they kind of look like spells, protection charms, or messages to gods. Which is why I think this Paracord runestone knot makes for a great keychain or necklace, because you can inscribe your keychain or necklace with your rune of choice. And then incorporate this really cool vertebrae bead. We did have some actual rune beads on our site, but we need to restock those. And to attach our keyring, I'm using snake knots. Now, as I said though, Viking warriors sometimes carved runes into their weapons, believing they could give strength in battle. Does that mean this keychain could give you strength and protection? Maybe. But back to our original question though, were runes just an alphabet or something more? And the answer is, well, kind of both. To the Vikings, runes weren't just letters to record information, but they carried meanings, power, and maybe even Viking magic? I don't know. They were carved onto grave markers to honor the dead, into weapons for strength, and onto homes for protection. So using our Paracord, we can kind of do this in our own way. To pay homage and tribute to this ancient alphabet, whether you're just an enthusiast of Viking and Germanic culture, or maybe you have actual roots in it, I don't know. Anyways, I think it's pretty interesting stuff, but I am far from an expert, of course. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. Hope you enjoyed.